No, I'm recording on all cylinders.
We might even have some kind of logical segue here. Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Hackaday podcast. I'm Elliot Williams, editor-in-chief of Hackaday.
And I'm Tom Nardi, Hackaday's managing editor.
This is episode 189. We'll be talking about 7 segments, 3 ways, candle code, DIY e-readers, and the great big Supercon badge reveal. What's up in the news this week? What'd you do last weekend, Tom?
I just got back from the East Coast RepRap Festival, and it was awesome. Good to get back out to these things after, COVID keeping us indoors for 2 years. They made the decision not to do the virtual thing, which I totally get. For a 3D printing, festival, it's hard to get excited about stuff just looking at it online, right? You want to see it in person.
Yeah.
So, there was, I think, a lot of pent up energy. People, had 2 years of pandemic projects they wanted to show off and didn't have this outlet. So they came out in force and it was a really good time. It's cool to see, some of the projects that we've covered, to actually see them in person or even some of the YouTube 3D printers, all those, people were in attendance. So to be able to put a face to some of those people is really cool.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day and how last time around, a couple years back, there were a whole bunch of new technical reveals and new, Prusa came out with a whole new printer. What was the fanciest thing you saw this year?
Well, it's interesting because I was actually thinking about that and it did seem... I feel like people were a little bit apprehensive about making any big changes. This is kind of the first peeking out, right?
Right.
Seeing, and compared to other years. Well, I mean, to give you an example, in 2019, which was the last East Coast RepRap, they unveiled, the Prusa Mini, which was a huge deal, for the first time ever. And there wasn't a big reveal this year. And I don't know if that's, there's a lot of stuff going on, right? It's not a great time to be launching new products or taking on a new risk. So it seemed a little bit subdued in that regard, at least from the big vendors and everything. But there were some cool individual projects, in the open source space, which is, arguably more what we're excited about anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I talked to a couple of those people. There will be, hopefully by the time you're listening to this, there'll be an article you can look at too. But I talked to a couple people doing, the belt printers were always on the verge of being practical. And now it seems like they're here. The trick now is to get them cheaper, right? So there was one design there called the baby belt or something. And it was fully open source design for a couple $100 and everything's printed parts and everything. That was really exciting. Couple of people doing recycling PET bottles into filament. That was big. So there was actually a few machines I saw there that were we've covered that in the past, where you kind of take the parts from an old 3D printer and jam some either the plastic from the bottle or what we saw VHS tape at one point, just jam it through the hot end and you'll get filament out the other end. So there was a couple of machines doing that, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I'd say the most excitement was the individual projects.
That's the way it should be.
No, yeah, right.
That makes me happy. Yeah.
You could probably argue we've plateaued in terms of the official big boy printers. They're all pretty much doing what they're going to do from here on out. Until some patents expire and that somebody else can grab some ideas. But yeah, it's definitely cool to see what the individuals are working on. That's definitely up our alley. So expect to read more on Hackaday soon about that.
And in Hackaday prize news, the wildcard round, the final, the 5th round of the Hackaday prize ended last Sunday. And our judges are furrowed away in their judges' den looking the prizes over. They'll get that done hopefully by this weekend, and we'll be able to announce the round 5 finalists next week. Then after another week, everybody has their last chance to tidy up their projects, dot the I's, cross the T's on all their projects, and then October 23rd, the final round snapshot will be taken and the judges will get on to final round judging, which then we'll finally announce at the Hackaday Supercon on November 5th. Hooray! And we got a big party planned for that. So happy Hackaday prize, everyone. I hope everyone had a good time. Everyone who entered, congratulations to you just for entering because, the documentation's the hard part. Let's face it. So even just getting in was a victory, and super congratulations to the 50 finalists we're going to have in a few days, and hopefully we get some really cool winners out of it. I'm stoked to see what our panel of external judges, and that's why I talk about them as if they weren't me. We have an external panel of judges, hackers, and former winners. Actually, a couple of them are former winners. You can read all about them on the prize.supplyframe.com website. All right, let's do a What's That Sound? What the heck?
This is a journey into sound.
What's that sound?
What's that sound?
Tom Nardi, would you like to hear the sound and see if you can guess what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always the stressful part. Let me get it. See if I can make a fool of myself for the pleasure of thousands of listeners at home.
I think you'll know this one.
That's even worse now, yeah.
This one's right up your alley. This
All
one's right up your alley.
Oh, yeah. This is Flex or Poxag pager.
Ooh, nice guess. That's actually not what it is.
Really? Really?
But really, really good guess, nonetheless. The real question is, what does it say?
Oh. Hold on. I have to take my shoes off. I need to use my toes for this one.
I don't think any of our listeners are going to be able to know what it says without doing some homework on this one. But if anyone wants to, for extra credit, we will feel free to decode the message for us as well. It's not Poxag. It's I'll say it. It's
Really? It sounds like that?
That's why I gave it to you.
Yeah, well, I feel doubly foolish.
Let's be honest. All the frequency modulated codes sound the same to normal human ears.
Let me I can do this.
I know you can. That's why.
God damn it.
Yes.
Yeah, it works. Very, very cool.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, listeners out there, if you know what it was, and even better, what the message said, head on over to hackaday.com/podcast and fill out the form. Give us the handle you'd like to be called on the air, your best guess, and next week we will read through the answers, roll the dice, and someone with the right answer will get a Hackaday podcast t-shirt. I said t-shirt differently. Well, starting off the hacks, I'd like to talk about a news story. This is seeing if cheating at chess the hard way is even possible. We covered a video by Captain Steele, who built himself a little test rig. And, well, I mean, if you heard some of the allegations about the Hans Niemann chess cheating scandal were that he possibly had a sex toy stuck up in him and was receiving chess cheating answers by Morse code, vibrational Morse code. I have no idea if that's far-fetched or not, but Captain Steele went to make his own such device, and he actually used an ESP32 and just a little, like a pager vibrator motor, and wanted to see through what thickness of human flesh it would be able to be detected. And rather than do anything unthinkable with a stock ESP module, he bought a bunch of fairly thick sliced baloney and laid it on the top of this thing, and then took a metal detector wand over and figured out, calibrated how many thick slices of baloney would keep him from metal detecting the ESP32 underneath. I have to say, it's a funny video. I think in terms of science, my feeling is that the biggest piece of metal on an ESP32 unit is that giant RF can, right? Like the whole thing is in a big metal shield. That alone is probably more metal than your standard remote controlled device has in it.
I was going to say, is slices of bologna an SI unit? Like, we're talking about the scientific method here.
There was no banana for scale, so I couldn't tell how thick his bologna was, but it looked like it was imperial bologna rather than metric bologna.
It's quite a story. This is quite a story. I'm glad that Dan decided to write this up, and I'm glad you picked it too.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people were having fun with this one because some of these rumors are frankly just absurd. I mean, the dude was playing chess online. If he's going to cheat, he just has another browser window open and he's typing moves into like some kind of computer chess engine, like on another computer, or he's got a laptop next to him. I mean, I don't even know how it's possible to prevent someone from cheating at like remote chess games. If you're in the same like arena, right, like sitting up on a stage, that's a lot harder. And even then, it's too easy.
Well, I was reading the Newsweek article that Dan links to in this thing, and it said, I guess, that this all stems from that they heard buzzing noises
Lord.
during the gameplay, and then that kind of, how it goes on the internet, that snowballed into this story. But, like, let's say, okay, there was some little vibrate, like, why, like, couldn't it have been in his shoe? Like, wouldn't that be the most logical thing? He had, like, a little thing in his shoe that was, like, why go there with it?
That's the classic, actually, is in your shoe.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned that because art imitates life or something, or life imitates art.
One
or
of them things.
September 7th, we published a hack about James Stanley about cheating in chess by building a little insert that would go into a shoe, and it had a little tapper in it, and so it would go ping, 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 ping. And he called this Sockfish, which is hilarious because I think the best chess engine at the moment is called Stockfish. And so his cheater that goes inside your shoe is called Sockfish. Anyway, the point is this was done with, just a little vibration motor inside a 3D printed housing to go inside your shoe. I mean, that would be the, quote, easy way to do it. I mean, again, with these remote games, the easy way to do it is to just look in a different browser window.
Yeah, well, I guess I have a quote that says, he says, I'll strip fully naked, and if they want me to do it, I know I'm clean.
Yeah, so I did a little reading into this just to see, because, people are forming opinions, and of course I don't know anything. So I went and saw what I could find, and chess.com has a 72-page report on the Hans Niemann event, and they conclude that he very likely cheated. And what's interesting is that they have, records of all the games that have ever been played there, and they know people's rankings, and they get to see what moves they make, and they can look over the moves they make, and they kind of do statistical analysis on it. This guy, Hans Niemann, is either the fastest rising top player in classical chess in modern history, so either he's like a super ultra mega genius, or he's cheating a lot. And that's, I think, what you can say from looking at these numbers. He has these like long stages where, he would play at what looked like his level, and then he would have other games that just go way outside of it. The conclusion of the chess.com people is that it's very likely he was cheating in at least 100 games, and probably 50 or so of them for money, including many prize events, at least 25 streamed games, and 100 plus rated games on chess.com as recently as when he was 17 years old. They do think that he's probably a pretty good chess player, but some of them are just outrageously good, and the moves match moves suggested by Sockfish in that situation. And I think that's the other bit that's really damning, is that they're comparing his moves against a particular chess engine and finding that kind of the most suspicious pivotal moves in the game were the same ones made by the chess engine. Now, is that proof either? Of course it's not, right? The guy might just be
right.
a real freaking genius. I mean, what do I know? He may be as good as the best chess computer, and by that he makes the same moves as the best chess computer. That doesn't necessarily mean he's cheating, but yeah, I don't know.
but yeah,
but it looks ugly. It looks ugly.
It's so weird. Like I know zero about the chess world, except for that song, that One Night in Bangkok.
That's all you need to know.
Another, like 5 days ago, the Norwegian Chess Federation president resigned after admitting the cheating. So I guess this is like a thing. Like, there are a lot of these guys cheating
Must be
in
a
chess.
thing.
Who knows? Or maybe he's like, oh man, they're on to us. They're on to the vibrating sex toys. I got to bail.
That's a bummer. Yeah, so, right, speaking of sex toys,
good.
Captain Steele's video here, we returned to that before we leave.
Yeah, did we talk about the project? I've lost track.
His results are that like 8 or 9 of these fairly hefty stacks of baloney are enough to shield an ESP32. And then the other question that was, I think, even more interesting was not about whether you can metal detect the metal content at all, but rather whether you can hear it emitting, and if you could pick it up with like a anti-spy bug detector or something. And he tries one of these out on it, and his conclusion is that his bug detector may be a crappy one. But even if you take, the best bug detector in the world, it's not going to detect a radio that's off at the time you're trying to detect it. So that's kind of a bummer too. And I think all of this does kind of point out how easy it would be to get this done and how really tough the countermeasures job has got to be.
I can't possibly think of a segue from from balonies to e-readers, but my first project I liked of the week was a DIY e-reader as hot swap mechanical keys. I mean, it's a cool project on its own. I like the tactile feedback using keyboard switches for page turning. That's really cool. I mean, the whole thing is to get away from these kind of touchscreen interfaces that a lot of these ebooks have now. They want like a very strong page turn. Like you want to really feel like you've accomplished something when you turn that page, and that's cool on its own. But kind of the thing that really attracted me to this one is I'm really excited to see that there's this blossoming kind of community of DIY e-readers, right? Like, open source e-readers. And we're finally getting to the point now where like the e-paper screens are big enough and affordable enough that, hackers can start putting their own reading devices together. And I mean, that's great. I think we all, like the Kindle is the device you love to hate, right? I mean, it's perfect from a hardware standpoint, but then it's the service that it wants to connect to, which a lot of us have misgivings about. And short of liberating them, which of course is its own story, the answer is really to make a hacker-friendly open source reader that we don't have to worry about. Is it looking over our shoulders, and who is it reporting our reading habits to, and that sort of thing. And we've seen these for a little bit. We talked about the Open Book project, of course. I wrote about the Ink Plate, which is actually like an actual Kindle screen that's like paired with a development board, and there's been some interesting work there to turn that into a custom e-reader. And I just think it's really cool to see these things developing now, but then also it's kind of seeing these different products is letting us see where the weak spot is, because so far all the ones I've seen can really only read plain text. So they all have this intermediary step where you gotta like take the EPUB or the PDF or whatever and run it through stuff on the computer to get just plain text, which is obviously not ideal from a reading standpoint. So it seems to me that like the next frontier of these DIY e-readers is really going to be the firmware side and figuring out how to read at least EPUB, because that's a pretty open standard. At least read that on device, and then from there move into maybe PDF and that kind of thing. And I think that'll be a big milestone. When the software is ready, because the hardware is clearly coming. It's just a matter of somebody getting the code working.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I am one of those people who I have an old hacked Kindle kicking around somewhere. I tried to use that for a while. It was really fun to play with, but then when it came to reading stuff on it, I would like load PDFs onto it, and the PDF viewer was just horrible. I would give my eye teeth for an e-reader with a good PDF reader in it. That's all I need, right? Because everything I want to read, I want to be able to fetch up as a PDF anyway. So,
and you're never going to get it from Amazon because they want to sell you, DRM.
That's not their game.
Files, right? Like they have zero interest in you being able to look at data sheets on their Kindle.
You mentioned Joey Castillo's Open Book, and that really is like one of the prettiest, nicely finished kind of projects around there. And I think that's important because the people who will be doing the software development for these may not necessarily be hardware hackers. And I think it's good if you can kind of streamline them getting into the project as easily as you can, because now, like you say, if it's a software problem now, making the hardware easy for them is the best thing you can do.
Incidentally, I saw on Twitter that Joey's bringing several of the open books to Hackaday Supercon.
Super!
He said he was going to bring I think 20 kits or something. So,
oh my God.
If you're listening, please hold one of the kits for us to look at. But yeah, it is an awesome project. I mean, we've covered that a lot, and it's definitely the one to watch. But, there's always room for, other ideas and competition, so that's cool.
All right, my next hack is 3 hacks. I There's something going out there. There's something in the water. There's synchronicity happening here. These are all mechanical 7-segment display hacks, except one of them's a 16-segment display hack. I guess I'll start off with Jack, 7 segments, but not as you know them. This is really cool. Just when you think you've seen every possible way of doing 7-segment displays, this one has pieces that slide up and down. So one for the left-hand column, one for the middle column, and one for the right column of the 7 segments. And if you slide them up and down just right, of course, the segments have a yellow part showing or a black part showing, and you can kind of turn all the elements on and off by pushing these up and down. Right now the sign is manual, but you could totally imagine making it driven with motors. It's a lot of motors. You might have to think of some clever mechanism. This one's meant to be just driven by hand and is a really cute take on the 7-segment display. But ramping it up a notch, we'll have to talk about Edkarat Singh Khalsi's flip segment digital clock is a mechanical marvel. Now, Edkarat has given us some of the most amazing 3D printed clock designs we've ever seen here. Most of them have been analog. This one's digital, and the segments are on what look like kind of like those arms on old school typewriters. They flip up and it's like holding the segment along with it, and they all kind of snake around each other. It's all driven by a bunch of cams underneath that work some levers, and they have enough mechanical advantage to like flip these things like they're the letters in a typewriter up into place. And it's just so beautiful, because the cams have the elements coming forward and backward and forward and backward and falling and rising. Whole thing is 3D printed. You could make this yourself, and it is a beautiful mechanical device.
I was going to say, it actually reminded me a little bit of like a circuit sculpture. The way the
right?
arms so that,
Yeah. And last up, this one just blows my mind, from Kango Suzuki. I'll see your 7-segment mechanical display and raise you to 16 segments. Kango had built a wooden turn-a-crank mechanical 7-segment display before, and this one is a 3D printed design. It's a little bit bigger. It works, instead of by having the segments come out at you, or as in our first one, slide up and down, these ones rotate, and they're 3D printed in yellow on one side and a gray on the other. So when they turn one way, they're kind of on, and they turn the other, they're off. They've got a little gear around the middle of them and kind of some racks that run along them and push them forward or backward to turn the gear and pivot the little segments. You kind of have to see this one in action.
Yeah, really.
The coolest thing, though, is it's completely 3D printed from beginning to end. It's got a bunch of 3D printed springs in it that actuate these little gear racks, and they stick out the back, and so he can put in a card, a punch card essentially, with holes in it some places and solids others, and this determines what character is displayed on the 16-segment display. The video is in Japanese. You may or may not understand it. It's actually, I think it's Japanese text-to-speech. I think it's narrated by a Japanese robot. So you may not understand it, but you can watch this thing be put together and run. And the mechanism for sliding the cards in and pressing them into place and then pulling them back out is absolutely brilliant. This one, it's just killer.
It can be any language you want. It's still gonna blow my mind watching this thing work. It makes me think of like, steampunk is supposed to be like, what if they had computers and stuff much earlier, and
right,
Victorian technology was high tech or all that. Like, this is some kind of 7-segment punk. I don't even know what to call it, but it's some like alternate reality where LED 7 segments weren't good enough or impossible to make or whatever, right? And they had to figure out how to make them out of other weird things. I especially love the first one you talked about from Jack, because that reminds me of like a slide rule or something. Like, this is definitely something that could have been made, you can almost do this like a cardstock and stuff, really. But at the same time, it somehow looks like super cyberpunk and futuristic. It's something about like the little partial parts coming out the top and bottom. You can imagine how like a clock on the wall would have these little vestiges up and down, where you just read the center.
What blows my mind about all three of these put together is that the 7-segment display, the 16-segment display, these ideas are as old as time. It's like, 100 years old, this idea. And yet, this week, we saw 3 different new takes on this oldest idea. And if you go back through Hackaday and you're like, how many 7-segment / 16-segment displays have we seen? 1 million. How many mechanical ones have we seen? 500,000, right? Like, it's astounding. And if you'd asked me last week, will I ever see another completely novel mechanical or even not mechanical 7-segment, 16-segment display, I might have been stupid enough to say no. And this week, we got 3 of them. You people out there are just crazy creative, and it's astounding to me. And I just have to say, if this doesn't show you what kind of mad people are out there working on awesome, awesome projects, I don't know what will.
But I think like the fact that it is such an old school kind of iconic thing is probably what pushes people to redo it. Like everybody knows it. From little kids to retirees, they've all seen these things on a simple clock, and it's very approachable to be like, okay, well, you know how that works, and here's mine with punch cards and linkages.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate flex for architects is to like design a new chair. Right? Because everybody's done chairs for like hundreds and hundreds of years. If you can come up with an awesome new chair, you are the winner. And here we go with 3 7 / 16 segment display. Bam.
Speaking of taking a relatively straightforward concept, evolving it and pushing it farther and farther into an extreme, this project, this headboard contains an artificial sun, is one of those things where, the more you look at it, the more there is to be impressed about it. The idea here is Sector 7 wanted to have a light over the headboard, so you wake up to an artificial sunrise, right? That's the kind of project we've seen a bunch of times before, and you could even buy like little off-the-shelf sunrise clocks and that sort of thing. But they took that little nugget of an idea and just went farther and farther and farther, and the end result is it can only be described, in the write-up. It said it looks like something came out of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is pretty apt. Yeah. It certainly comes from a distant future that I would like to live in. Beautiful curved piece that goes over the bed, so you're looking straight up at it, and it's got this 3D printed hexagon pattern with nylon to diffuse the LEDs. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous externally. And then you start looking at the documentation. The documentation's phenomenal. The video that talks about it is like a movie. It's like, I don't know if you looked at the video. It's like it's literally like a scripted film. It's supposed to be like, we downloaded this from some space ship or something, and they're trying to. It's crazy. But you buy it because it looks like a movie prop. I could absolutely believe this was in some kind of a movie or something.
100%.
So you get through the independent film that is used to document it, and then you keep going deeper and deeper. You could certainly have just a simple switch, right? But no, it's got, voice commands and there's like AI you talk to set up when you want to wake up. I mean, it's just, on the surface, it's funny because I actually was editing this last night, I guess, for it to come out this morning. At a quick glance, I was like, yeah, whatever. It wasn't really that big of a deal. But the more I read it, I was just like flabbergasted. I was like, I want desperately to talk about this because we've seen, really well documented projects here and there, right? And we're always happy to see somebody put as much, if not more, effort really into documenting it than building it. But I don't know that we've ever seen anything that was, this blends fact and fiction and reality and in a very creative way. I'm not saying every Hackaday project needs to have a short film attached to it, but if you're gonna do it, this is definitely the high water mark to compare yourself to.
This is the fit and finish thing, right? That just blows you away. This is definitely not a hack. This is a serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the voice interface is run by a single board that costs, I'm looking at it now, it's about $40. It's 30 in volume. The Speak Up, and it's a recognition voice recognition board. It's got a little custom ASIC on it that recognizes 200 different commands and then will run them for you. And it basically just tells your microcontroller what it just heard. So that's a really sweet solution for people who don't want to like throw a Raspberry Pi and do, what is it, Jasper? One of the nice open voice recognition libraries. Man, I need to play around with one of those.
I mean, I believe this is the first time we've seen that board, because I actually searched the site for it, because it seemed like such an incredibly useful little module. And as far as I can tell, we've never run across it before. So if nothing else, it's cool for introducing us to that.
Absolutely. I mean, phew. But yeah, space wake-up lamp.
Yeah, I guess if you had to do the short version.
All right, well, it is almost Halloween, and you know what that means. It's time to put fire inside pumpkins. What could possibly go wrong? Well, if you don't want to do that, here is a cold light to warm your heart. This is an artificial candle project by Wagiminator. The LED candle here is made up of 4 of those WS2812 little 5mm LED shaped lights, and they're all powered by an AT-Tiny 85. So none of this is breaking the budget. He's modified it to fit inside a 3D printed ghost, but that's not really the point. The point here is that he has a phenomenal candle simulation running on these. And the gimmick is that with 4 LEDs spaced a little bit apart from each other and capable of doing full color, you can make it look like there's actually wind blowing on a candle. And it uses some code from Mark Sherman, links also in the show notes and in the article. Inside the code, if you dig in, it imagines that there's wind coming from over here, and then it makes the LEDs on one side brighter and darker on the other. So it kind of moves the average center of light emitting over to one side or the other. And the further over it is that way, the more it flickers, like it has a stronger wind on it, and the more it wants to get back. So it's got like this kind of spring force that you see if you actually like blow on a real candle flame. It goes over, but then it like flips back. This makes the most convincing candle simulation. Like, they're in this video, the shadows are right. You know, if you actually look at a candle, the shadows move, right? It's not just bright dim, but it's moving, and this hammers that effect. And it is just so absolutely fantastic. And I've actually played around with this myself once. I had a strip of WS2812s and put them around in a ring, and we actually did kind of a fire simulation, but with the same effect, with it moving from one side to the other. And we put a bunch of wood on top of it and had a little, quote, campfire inside for my son's birthday because we couldn't go outside because it was raining. Just the simple act of having the light move around and like subtly shift colors was enough to fool us like a couple times. And so I totally believe that this works. And it's some awesome coding to get it done. And you should really check it out and head on over to Mark Sherman's GitHub and see how he does it and watch his video demo, because this is the way our electric candles need to be made, folks.
That's a perfect way to kind of summarize it too, because, you know, on the surface you would think, okay, whatever, I'll make it blink, right? Like, I'll make the LED blink and it'll be fine. And, you know, if you look at one of these little cheapy LED candles, that's basically what they do. They blink a little bit here and there, and whatever, they're cheap. This is really the difference between just the surface level, get it done, we got to ship it to the dollar store, and someone who's really obsessed with the nuance of something so deceptively simple, right? Yeah. Like you said, it seems like it'd be really easy, but it's actually very hard to make a convincing flame. And, you know, I like in the write-up where it even talks about, you know, you need to give it random numbers, right? Because you don't want it to be repeating. If it repeats, then that's you know, right out the window. So like it goes into how to implement a pseudo random number generator, you know, little flash as possible, because he's only using in this one AT-Tiny 13. So it's much harder than you'd think, right, to make a convincing looking candle. But like you said, it's worth it in the end, because it really is a difference between just like a blinking light bulb, and something that you look at and like something in our reptilian brain is like, oh, is that fire? Should I be afraid of it? Should I should I run? I think there's a flame over there. I don't know if it was the same code, but we've seen similar like realistic blinking code implemented in like Doom and stuff. I think too, like to make the lights flicker more realistically. It kind of reminded me when we were you're talking about this, like what it takes to make it look realistic. That's been added to other mediums than LED candles too.
Between the WS2812 drivers and some infrared remote, things could kind of be getting tight in a little bitty microcontroller. So there's probably also some clever optimization going on here, and that's where you get the linear feedback shift register for the random number generator and stuff like that. I mean, this is, the candle and the like glowing, the like flickering flame effect is the seller here, but there's some other cool stuff to check out if you're into microcontroller programming.
This next one is, now thinking about it, I picked this for mainly the same reason I picked the DIY e-reader earlier. This is a Raspberry Pi phone for the modern era. And it talks about how, we've seen these attempts to make a cell phone in the old school sense, or a smartphone. We've seen these attempts to make DIY phones for a long time. Some of the most popular projects we've run actually have been like DIY phones. And they always seemed like they were missing some kind of critical component, or you had to make too many sacrifices, This project sort of makes the case that we're largely there. We've got good cellular modems that you can get for a reasonable price. We've got powerful enough single board computers that they can operate as reasonable smartphones. The only thing that's kind of missing now for the true DIY phone revolution is just the desire. And a little bit of the software, like for the e-readers. Like, it'd still be nice if there was some easily hackable open source unified firmware for these kind of things. But we're definitely at the point where if you are sick of the rat race with commercial phones and being a product that's sold to the highest bidder, and you want to make your own phone, you definitely can. Like, it's not necessarily the beginner project, but it's certainly possible. All the pieces are out there. You just need to put them together and write the code to glue it together. And a lot like we talked about a couple episodes ago, the rotary cell phone kit that's out there now. I mean, it's a reality. Like, you can actually build your own phone that is yours. It's not what was forced upon you by committee. It could be your phone that works the way you want, and you don't have to be stuck on some ancient cellular technology because they have these LTE modems now, and you don't have to have this super slow chip because we have stuff like the Pi 4 if you need that much oomph in your handheld. So it's just an exciting time, I think, for being able to build your day-to-day devices on your own terms. And, it's certainly not for everybody, but there's definitely been times where I've looked at my smartphone and it's like, I wish you weren't the way you were. And, projects like this are just a reminder that we're getting there, And it's really cool to be able to kind of see it happen in real time, be like on the forefront of it.
I hear you. I said this today as I was walking out the door. I picked up my phone, the battery was dead, and I was like, in the future, all I want is a phone with more than 12 hours of battery life. Like, not where's my flying car, not, where's my teletransporter. Where the hell is my phone that can run for more than 12 hours without needing to be plugged in? I used to have one. I had one of these flip phones. It would go for a week, right? But that thing was
that's the wild thing.
so horrible to text on. It was just so unpleasant to use in a whole bunch of ways. But then the trade-off is this other side where you get the phone that's a supercomputer and a battery hog, and there isn't kind of anything in between. And this looks like maybe you could make yourself something in between. And I don't know how these do for battery life. I am kind of concerned that it's got like a Pi in it. I wonder if you couldn't do the same sort of things, but on a lower power chip with fast wake up or something.
Yeah.
But man, I hear you. There's definitely, the current state of our phones is not perfect. And there's definitely room for hacker projects here. I think I'm totally giving something away, but one of our workshops at Supercon's going to be about building your own phone.
Oh, well, wow.
As of yet, unannounced. We'll announce these. We'll announce these later next week, but one of them's going to be about that.
Revealing secrets live on air.
I think it's an older phone, though. I think it's a 2G phone. Don't get your hopes too up if you don't have 2G reception where you live. But in terms of DIY phones, I think we are seeing, something of a flourishing. I think it's the beginnings of a flourishing in DIY cell phones, and I think that's awesome. My first quick hack this week is Louise Katzowitz's Thrills with an LED thriller jacket. This is fantastic. It has got so many LEDs in it for a wearable you can't even imagine. But they're beautifully choreographed and covered up with little 3D printed diffusers. The video you can watch Louise go through building this thing, it is just a superb tutorial in making your own blinky, costumey type devices. And, Halloween's coming right up. Next up, Pekka Vannanen compensating for your TV's backlight. Pekka had a TV with non-uniformly colored backlights, and that made especially black and white movies blotchy. His solution was to take a picture of the screen and calibrate it out. And so he actually changes the color in the movie that he's going to play on the screen so that it plays back in the right color, even though the backlights are off. It's fantastic. It's triumph of software over hardware, and it keeps a kind of TV that's on its last legs out of the dump. And last up, VJ Miller, quick reload for your glue sticks, the Glue Gun 6-shooter. Does VJ ever make anything that you need? No, and this is no exception to the rule. This is a rotating barrel with 6 glue sticks on the back so that you're never without. You lose one, you rotate the barrel, you slide the next one in, you're ready to keep hot gluing. The thing I really love about this is that it's actually button activated and it's got a little motor. So when you run out of glue, you press the thing and it goes zzz, and then the next one slips right into place. It's a fantastic mechanism, and just for its own sake, comes along with a funny video, VJ Miller style. Give it a look.
They talk about independent films with your project. He's always good for one of them too, right? My first hack is Tom Stanton builds an osprey. I may have tacked on eventually to this title because this is the very, very early steps of building an osprey. For those unaware, an osprey is a military aircraft that has very distinctive tilt rotors. It can take off and land vertically like a helicopter, and then the nacelles rotate, and then the propellers face forward. In real life, they were notoriously difficult to engineer, and my understanding is even some of the early ones, unfortunately, had a habit of crashing because of the complexity of all the stuff going on. Tom is looking to take on the challenge on a smaller scale and recreate not just like the look of it, but how the thing works and how it makes the tilt rotor and all that kind of thing. And this is sort of just like an engineering model of that, and it's very exciting so far because it certainly looks the part when it's flying around in the video. So this is something to keep an eye on going forward to see what the final product is going to look like. Next up is simple CNC gear production with Arduino. This comes our way from Mr. Innovative, and it is a little desktop machine for cutting gears. They're not great gears, I should say, right off the bat, as some of the commenters pointed out. And it's just a cool little machine that, if you were in need of a bunch of tiny gears that don't need to be trusted with anything very important, you could use this to crank them out in short order. And last up is dumping an eMMC chip with many bodge wires. I just had to pick this one. This is like a classic Hackaday post. I don't want to be around to see the day where this isn't the kind of thing that we run, on a semi-monthly basis. The idea here was there was a flash chip in a camera. Camera was shot, wanted to get the images off of it. How do you do it? Well, you pull the little ball grid array chip out, flip it over, and a bunch of tiny little bodge wires to hook it up. It says in the end it was only a dozen wires, but when they're when they're this thin, a dozen might as well be 100. This is the quintessential hack, right? This is what we're here for, seeing how you can save the day with a tip you learned on Hackaday. Never get tired of feats of ridiculous soldering like that.
All right, that brings us to our Can't Miss articles. These are long-form pieces written by our fantastic Hackaday writing staff. This week I picked Lewin Day's Roller Coasters Are Triggering the iPhone's Crash Detection System. And this was ripped straight out of the headlines. There have been cases of the crash detection system on iPhones and iPhone watches falsely triggering on roller coasters and, as Lewin puts it, other strange situations. Basically, they're programmed to, in case of something that looks like you've been in a car crash in terms of accelerometer readings and a couple other sensors, and we'll talk more about the range of sensors in a minute. They're supposed to say, oh man, maybe something happened, and place an emergency call for you if you don't reply to the phone or the watch. Now, you can see how this doesn't work when you're on a roller coaster. Like, you don't hear your phone ringing or feel it vibrating or whatever. And even if you did, if you're holding on for dear life, you're not going to reach over and slide the little thing off. So that part for sure. How it gets fooled into thinking that there's been a crash is the tricky part. And one thing Lewin mentions in this article is that Google's been doing this with their Pixels for a while and haven't had nearly the same problem that Apple has. And so maybe Apple's doing something more naive. Maybe they're doing something, they just rolled the system out and it's got a whole bunch of bugs in it or something. There was a neat interview with some Apple engineers on TechCrunch that got linked into here. And they said, yeah, it's mostly the accelerometer, but they're looking into some other things. They're looking into, because you want to be sure that the person is in a car, is the phone connected to a car's Bluetooth, right? That'll mean you're inside a car. The other one they suggested that I thought was hilarious is, does the phone see a bunch of Wi-Fi hotspots going by, coming and going? Because that probably also means you're in a car. The thing that really creeped me out, however, is that they also suggested they might be constantly listening for road noise or engine noise to see if you're in a car at any given time. And for sure, if you want to say, is this person in a car, watch their location change on the GPS, listen to them all the time, check what they're connected to. There's a whole bunch of spooky ways you could figure out if the person is in a car. And, part of me says, these bastards are just trying to justify more invasive monitoring of people. They're not going to turn that microphone off when you're not in a car, right? Like, they have to know when you're in a car to save you. So that part of me is a little bit meh on this whole thing. On the other hand, it's pretty clear that just going by the acceleration sensors alone isn't going to work. And there was an example where somebody, his phone fell off of his motorcycle and phone got broken, but before it had completely died, it had told all his relatives that he was in a horrible accident. And so the next day when he gets a new cell phone, he gets all these text messages from his mom, "Are you still alive?" And so I think the consequences of false alarms here are kind of scary. Lewin takes the side here that the potential good is so great that it's probably worth it. And it may actually be true that getting an ambulance out to people who can't respond fast enough is worth doing. I mean, what you'd really want is the thing to call when, you have a heart attack and you're walking down the street, right? Because that's when you need an ambulance quick, and that no accelerometer data is going to help with that. And now I'm suggesting that they put heart rate monitors on everybody.
That's actually kind of a perfect segue into the way I feel about it, because to me, this is just feature creep. If anything should be detecting when the car has been in a crash, it should just be the car. There was a much easier way to do this, and they've been doing it for decades already with services like OnStar. The car will certainly know if it's been in a crash. Like, it doesn't need to check the GPS. Was I moving? It doesn't matter because the front half is gone. Like, it knows with its own sensors. Yeah, like, it's gonna know when the airbags have deployed. And a modern vehicle is more than capable of contacting emergency services. This isn't a function that needs to be on our phones. I mean, why do if you got three people in the car, does 911 need to be called 3 times? You know, it's one car crash. Like, it doesn't really make sense.
Yep.
On the other hand, like you were saying, with a heart attack or something, that is something that it would make sense to have on-body sensors for, because there is no, obvious replacement for that. But to me, this whole thing looks like a solution looking for a problem. I mean, we already have the technology to notify emergency services in a car crash. And okay, you could say, well, my car's too old for it, and that's maybe a valid thing. But
someday you'll get a new car.
At some point, right? At some point, you're going to get a new car. To me, it just doesn't make sense. Imagine you had a whole bus full of these things going off when a bus crashes. Like it's a bunch of noise. It's noise that isn't helpful when the vehicle itself is more than capable of doing the job with little to no room for error. Like, there's no question. Have the airbags deployed, then call emergency services. It doesn't matter how it happened, whether it was a fender bender or you went off a cliff. Ultimately, the airbags are going off. Somebody needs to be notified. I mean, it's a cool experiment. I don't know if you mentioned it, where they said, like, they use the onboard barometer to detect the pressure spike of the airbag. I mean, it's all cool, but it's just it's ultimately, I think, just a way to justify, like you were saying, justify listening in on us and tracking what we're doing.
And I think you also made me figure out part of it. The reason that Apple wants to do this is because Apple isn't doing this. Right? Like, why does your phone want to know about crashes? The answer is because Apple wants to know. And they're bummed that only GM knows if you've crashed your car. They're jealous, and they want to know if you've crashed your car too. And they feel unloved and left out.
I like the screenshot from Google's detection, and it says, like, are you okay? And it's like, you have options where it's like, I need help. There was no crash. There was a minor crash. And that's like a classic Google thing to me, because, like, they're so unsure of themselves. But they still want the data to back up their own, like, learning algorithms, right? So they're like, did you have a crash? Was it a little crash, a big crash?
Like, well, how else are they going to learn?
Right. Yeah. You're another product that you're being an unpaid tester for.
You are teaching the machines. The reps from Apple say just about as much. They're like, they won't say on how many cases they've trained their data, but they're not putting wristwatches on people and crashing them in cars to see what happens. They said they've done it sounded like under 1,000 tests of, actual positive crash events here. I wonder if you can opt out of all of these services, because it seems like maybe you should.
Yeah, but you got to make your own cell phone, like we talked about before.
No, they must have a tick box somewhere where you can turn off the auto 911, right?
I would hope so.
I don't know. Al seemed to think that this used to be illegal, that auto 911 dialers without putting a human in the loop was somehow not allowed. And I don't know. This seems to be pointing out that that's not the case anymore, at least.
It's funny, too, because, I have a Pixel phone, and I didn't even know, unless mine's not new enough to do this. Does he say which ones have the crash detection? I mean, I haven't gotten a crash, so.
Yeah, so you wouldn't know.
Yeah, right. Oh, wow. Yeah. It's all the way back to the Pixel 3. That's old. And crash detection only works in the country of your phone's SIM and not when roaming. Like, this is so stupid. This is, like, there's so many... really, there's so many, gotchas here.
But there's no 911 here. In Europe, you have to dial 112. So, how would it work?
Yeah, right. That's the other thing.
In England, you have to dial 0118999.
Well, it's interesting, now we're talking about this and I'm on the Google help thing. There's a safety app. I didn't even know that was on the Pixel. I never even opened it. And when I opened it, it's like, set up your emergency contacts and like your blood type and stuff. But then when you go into the settings, that's where you can disable or enable the car crash detection, and mine's off. So,
okay.
I mean...
Good on them.
So thanks for it being off by default. Like, if it wasn't for Hackaday, I wouldn't even know it was an option. But emergency SOS is on, whatever the hell that means. my mother, they had installed some like silent alarm thing at her workplace, and no one told her.
Oh, geez.
So she came in one time, and there was this little fob on her desk, and she's like, "What the hell is this thing?" So she's pushing a button, and it doesn't do anything. And she's walking around, pushing a button, pushing a button, pushing a button. And she's trying to figure out, like, is it a light? Is it like? She's like pointing at stuff. She said she must have pushed a button like 5-10 times. All of a sudden, the police busted in and like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And, you know, they got like guns drawn and everything. And she's like, "What's going on?" And she was freaking out. The thing was, the more times you pushed it was the severity level. So like, pushing 1 was, I got a creeper here, maybe I need help. 2 is like, I'm fearful. 3 is he's got a weapon. And she hit it like 10 times. So they went into like SWAT mode and like we're busted the door down. And she had no idea what she was doing. And she was
She's
like,
I
who
wonder if this
installs
thing
the
turns
system?
the lights on.
Yeah, she's like, click, 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 click. Like, who put something like that in without even a note, you know?
Oh my God. That's beautiful.
And then she like locked the thing away in a drawer because she never wanted to see it again and accidentally be like, "Oh, what's this thing again?" Click, 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 click. Well, under normal circumstances, we wouldn't pick our own posts to talk about. It seems somehow uncool, but this is a special breaking news just today, at least from the context when we're recording this. We finally put out the information for the 2022 Hackaday Supercon badge, and you're going to need some time to wrap your head around it. I promise you. We've been playing with the prototypes for a while now, and at least I need all the all the help I can get with it. The idea this year was, we've seen these every year. The badges get more and more powerful and capable, and we're kind of guilty of that ourselves. And in 2019, we put out a ridiculously capable badge, and it's really cool. But at the end of the day, there's value in going old school sometimes, right? And learning how things work at a lower level. Sometimes we can be kind of spoiled by all our modern technology. I mean, we're running Python on microcontrollers these days, so
Yeah.
we've kind of lost our way in some regards. This badge is sort of the antidote. This is a virtual 4-bit computer presented to you kind of in the style of something like the Altair, these like old school desktop, how to build it from a kit you sent away from computers. There's a row of buttons on the bottom. There's a bunch of LEDs. There's a lot of documentation, and the rest is up to you, my friend. And, we hope that it's going to be, for a lot of people, a big shock. I think most of us aren't even old enough to have necessarily used a computer like this. I mean, the only reason I ever got to toggle the front panel switches on an Altair is because I went to the VCF thing, and they were kind enough to show me, because I stared at it trying to figure out how anyone used these things, as a computer. So they sat me down and said, "Okay, well, here's how it works." And it's eye-opening, really, to see that, because once you realize, like, okay, these buttons are the commands and binary, and this is the value, and okay, I hit deposit and it goes into the memory. You really get this understanding of how the computer works that you just don't get, writing some code and double clicking it. There's too much abstraction in the modern world.
Yeah.
So you really, really get it with this. At least that was my personal experience playing with this badge for, like I said, we had the prototypes for a little bit now. It really is. You're connected to it. This is something, there's a sense of accomplishment, like, because you didn't just, copy and paste something from the internet and run it. I mean, you tapped the little buttons in there, and you made sure all the LEDs lined up with the right commands, and like even the smallest accomplishment. I got 2 squares to light up on the LED array, and I took a picture. I was so excited. I was like, I want to remember this moment where I got a square to light up, and I think it's gonna be really cool. It's going to be a challenge for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But so was 2019. I think in the end, I think the FPGA was a little bit much for people, because if you weren't if you weren't up to speed with it, it was I think tough to you only got a weekend, right? This is certainly straightforward enough that if you read the documentation, and the documentation is phenomenal, you'll really understand every bit of what happens inside this virtual computer. And I think that people will come away from it more appreciative of what we have, and I think it's going to be a big learning experience. So I'm excited to see what people do with it.
Yeah, and what you said about like the kind of end to end, it's like that NAND to Tetris course. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I looked over the shoulder of some people at my old hackerspace doing it, and totally jealous. Wish I got to, actually, because it really is the case that it's such a simple design. It's 4 bits. It's got like 30 instructions. You can learn all of them. And so learning the machine language for this thing isn't a problem. The question is now, how do you do something cool with that? And that gets to be a little bit more work, right? You can kind of come in at that angle pretty quickly, where you're like, I can figure out how to make this thing add numbers and do loops and branches and, the kind of basic computery stuff. And then you can look at the display where it's got basically everything you would want to know about the state of the machine has an LED associated with it, including the memory. It's got LEDs that blink on the ALU, and Voya's drawn the NAND gates in there that do the work in the ALU. So if you want to figure out how computers add binary numbers together, it's only 4 bits, and you can look at the circuit that, is emulated, but emulated doing this, and watch the lights propagate through and watch the bits propagate through. And so if you want to take it in that direction, you totally can. Because it's only got so few instructions, there's an LED for each instruction. And so when you type in its command, the right LED lights up. And this is simulating the decoder in one of these retro chips that's like, this is my machine instruction that makes these parts of the machine active. And so it does the adding for you. And it's kind of like that here, but it also serves as a super easy mnemonic for, I want to do a move, I want to do an add. Which one is it? Oh, it's this one. And then you just press up or down until the right LED blinks. And then eventually you learn its machine language that way, which is also kind of fun.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hugely beneficial as an educational thing, too. Like you said, if you really want to know how does stuff happen inside the CPU, or, if you never had any hands-on experience with doing machine language stuff before, like, you're going to have it now, whether or not you want it, you're going to get it, And like you said, with the display that shows all the opcodes on there, it's really cool because once you put the program in, you can then step through it, right?
Yeah.
To verify, and it's cool to see everything lights up, so you can be like, oh, what was 2 lines ago, and you hit the address backwards twice, and then it lights up and shows you right on the screen what that command was. So it's not even like you got to have your little sheet of loose leaf and you're trying to compare, which one did I put in, which one did I didn't. It's it says in the voice says in the documentation, like, the efforts have been made to make it as easy to program as possible, given the limitations, right? So, it would still be, this is still easy mode compared to, one of those old 70s machines. Right. But you're still going to get a lot of the benefits, too. So it's really the best of both worlds. I like one of the details, and all the opcodes are short enough that you don't need to do multiple lines for, an instruction. Whereas, I know from... when I was playing with the Altair, sometimes you have to put you put the binary in for whatever you want to do, move or add or whatever, and then you deposit, and then you do the next line is the value, and then the next, what I mean? So it takes multiple lines to do one thing. But the way that Voya has it set up, the commands are always so short that you can do everything with one line. So it makes it much easier to keep track of, much easier to enter, just a nicer experience. But you're still getting all the value of understanding how it works and entering in the actual binary. So it's like I said, best of both worlds. I think it's going to be very, very educational.
Educational is the right word. I was joking with Voya about this. I'm like, dude, this is a whole semester's college course for computer science majors. This thing is not a joke. And if you take it the other direction, it's also got a serial interface. So you can write programs on your laptop and then upload them to this thing and watch them run. And we've actually got an emulator of it that is 90-something% of the way there right now. But you can write code in this thing's assembly language, assemble it, and run it in our emulator right now and make sure it works. So if twiddling the bits is not your style, and frankly, I think it should be for at least a couple programs. But then once you want to start doing something to fill up the like 4K worth of instructions this thing has in a program, you're not going to want to type in 4,000 of these instructions over and over. This is now a job for your real computer, and you can take it to that and then upload it over serial. I think by the time Supercon rolls around, we'll have the emulator working for sure. We'll have our assembler up and running. So you should be pretty close. We don't have a compiler for it yet. If you want to go nerd out in that direction, I think somebody needs to write a compiler for it or a small operating system. So on the one hand, you can dig down and watch the LEDs blink when the NAND gates get their values. And on the other hand, you can take it the other way and write us a compiler, write us a small but reasonable operating system for this thing. I mean, it's full stack retro computer.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Somebody tried to write OS or something for it, and it does have the serial output, so
Yep.
we might be playing Zork on these things before too long.
4 ins, 4 outs. There's hardware hacking possibilities. Oh, please. Oh, please. This is going to be fun. I am just dying to see 500 of the craziest hackers in the world do when they get one of these in their hands.
It would seem to me that one badge can push code into the other. Is that accurate?
Oh, why not, right?
If you just wired them
swap
together.
The RX-TX.
Right. So I didn't put that in the write-up because I don't know the two of them ever been together.
Do you know who the only person in the world with 2 of these on his desk right now?
I think I know.
I scrounge up some AA's. I can see if it sends code from one to the other, but I don't see why it wouldn't.
Right. It seems like it definitely should. You just because when you hit load, it'll just wait.
Okay,
Yeah, it's gotta work.
Hold on.
Find out.
I gotta
got
get
some jumpers.
I gotta get 2 AA's. The jumpers are right in front of me. It's the batteries I gotta go scrounge up. Where the hell are batteries? Hold on, 1 sec. AA's. There you go. I can verify this in 10 seconds.
I was actually going to say, I wonder if you could power it through the expansion header. Just hook the 3-volt line up too.
Oh, I don't know why you couldn't. I don't think it's protected or anything.
But yeah, you could probably have one badge power the other one.
So what is it? It's RX goes to TX, TX goes to RX. Cross your streams, folks. Load. Okay, the light's back on. And then I should be able to go into run and hit run, right?
Run, yeah.
Oh, boom, it does work.
Oh, very cool.
Confirmed here on the Hackaday podcast that you can send code from one to the other.
So that's like viral stuff right there. You can just
That's right.
Whoever you meet, send code to them.
Bring DuPont header cables, folks, and you can send each other your code from one badge to the other. It's got memories on it. It's got like 16 different program slots.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that until I started reading the documentation closer. It can hold 15 or 16 programs at once, and then you can page through them. So
you can send me your cool one. I'll send you my cool one.
Again, kind of speaking of how it's more user friendly than the old school. It's not just this desktop box that can hold one program at a time. You can have several ones you're working on, easily switch between them. It's really cool. It's probably, short of just simulating it in software, it's probably the best way to actually get a hands-on experience with this sort of thing.
That's about it for this week's Hackaday podcast. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to leave a comment or follow any of the links we discussed in the show, head on over to hackadays.com/podcast. If you see anything cool or do anything cool, write us tips@hackaday.com. And until next week,
keep on hacking.
Then we could talk about real news in the news.
I didn't even realize I actually have been recording this whole time.
Gotta keep it fresh, yo.
I have nothing constructive to say, I guess. I had something that it fell through.
Actually, a strip of W8.W blah, blah, blah.
Anyway, well, just cut that part. You'll figure it out. You know how to edit things.